We will open up the virtual budget workshop meeting for Monday, June 1st. Before we get started, I'd like to take a moment and read a brief response to an email that we received from Elijah McGill regarding the tragic death of George Floyd. We as citizens cannot stand by and allow police brutality and acts of racism to continue in our police departments. We need to work to achieve justice and equality for all. We need to restore trust between the public and our police force. I have worked as an attorney in an office focusing on civil rights for over 20 years. From this experience, I know that being a police officer is one of the most difficult jobs in the world. We ask our police to make split-second decisions between securing the safety of the public and protecting the rights guaranteed by our Constitution. It is an incredibly difficult task. Those who do it well deserve the greatest admiration and respect. But those who do not, those officers who violate their duty to protect and serve, tear at the very fabric of the rule of law, which protects all of our liberties. Martin Luther King Jr., in his letter from a Birmingham jail, reminded us, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. We stand with those who seek justice and equality for all." I'd like to take a few minutes if any counselors would like to respond to Elijah before we jump into the agenda.
I would, Cindy. So I'm going to take off my counselor hat off just for a moment. I'm also, as many of you are aware, I'm a board member with Health Equity Alliance in Bangor, which we deal with the most marginalized citizens in our community. And one of the things, we deal with this every day. So awareness is something that is what we live. And I wanted to kind of just remind people out there that as we move forward with this, not that going out and showing your being behind somebody, it's a bit more than just that. Not just I'm in a photo, I'm doing this. It's like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar actually did a thing in the LA Times about we as individuals, and I'll say this from my own perspective as a white male, it's up to me to educate myself. And once I've educated myself, the alliance should be with doing more boots to the ground to make sure that we show, because I worry about this every time it comes up, that today, tomorrow, maybe through the week, it's going to be something people talk about it and then it's gone. So at Health Equity Alliance, we always look for individuals who want to really help to fight the causes for marginalized communities. And we're always looking for volunteers. So if you are listening in and want to see or be part of this process, we would really appreciate it, and just get a hold of us.
Thanks, Terry. Anyone else?
Yeah, I was very moved by what was happening this weekend, and not just this weekend, but the 6 days. And I reached out to Josh just to say, thank you for the work that you do. Thank you for everything that, that's happened, because I guess not realizing the challenges that these police officers are facing. And Josh responded in the kind, thoughtful way that he always does, considerate way. And we talked a little bit, and he said, and I'm going to quote him, and I'm sure he doesn't mind sharing this. He said, "Unfortunately, it only takes one of these abhorrent events to erase the daily examples of thousands of police officers doing good in their communities. And perhaps what's happening across the country these days will result in some good in the long run." And I thought that was a beautiful response. And it's true that there's only this one, these acts of violence by some police officers are far and few when you think about the thousands of police officers that we have in this country that really aren't like that. and I think the news, the media focuses on the bad, as usual, and we really just don't hear enough enough of the good. And certainly those police officers deserve to be arrested, and but I don't think that what they were doing in their line of duty was far and away wrong, above and beyond what is appropriate, above and beyond what is kind and civil, and above and beyond protecting and serving their communities. So I just wanted to reach out to Josh and just to say thank you, and thank you for training our young officers with empathy, to have empathy and compassion. So thank you.
Thanks. Anyone else?
I would like to, I don't mean to jump in front of Lori, and I don't mean to consume a whole lot of time here, or Megan, if you have comments too, I don't mean to, but here I go. I agree with all that. I think our force does a great job. I think this is a much larger issue than just this one instance has happened. It was huge. This was a tipping point. It's a tragedy, and the tragedy is this cultural level of racism that's still there. I mean, it's a huge issue. I would encourage everyone to become more educated on this. Read a book. There's so many great books being passed around. Mine was just delivered today, How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram Kendi. Highly recommend that to anybody. This is really important stuff. I also want to commend Elijah McGill. I've known Elijah for years. A fine young man, doing great things. He's studying at Harvard and whatnot. Well, he's distance learning at Harvard. But it's great. But it was a great letter to write. Passion and something he believes in. I encourage more people to voice their opinion and to be involved. But this is a very complicated issue. But ultimately comes down to all of us to not only respect the great work that a lot of our police forces do, but to acknowledge some of the really bad things that are happening, and also some of the implicit racism that still exists, that's so pervasive, just out of sight a lot of times until something like this comes up. We need to be better. We need to be better people. And not only do I stand with the people that are doing good work, but I kneel with the protesters.
Yeah, I'd just like to say also, to echo Sam's comments, to thank Elijah for his really thoughtful email. I received it just after getting home from the gathering on campus yesterday. And, oh, sorry, my dog's trying to destroy this table. And I mean, just for me to take a look at the different reactions and responses from different communities. Some police forces have come out and been combative with protesters, and there's been violence. And some community police forces have responded by kneeling with protesters or talking with them or standing with them. So we're seeing kind of on a community by community basis, sort of different responses. But there is an overall larger systemic cultural issue with a lot of law enforcement agencies. Not all of them, as we saw many, many great examples over the last week of law enforcement agencies who are really there for their community, even in this time of anguish and protest. It makes me happy to live in a community where I know that we're not perfect. We're not perfect, but I want folks out there who are watching this to understand that it is a council priority, not just this collection of people on the screen right now, but it has been a council priority for a very long time, that we care about community policing initiatives. We fund them. We spend an awful lot of time, and so does our town manager and chief of police, thinking about all these little intricate things. Like, for example, when we chose the new body vests, we talked a lot about not looking like military tactical gear. We have bike patrols because we're trying to get officers out of cars so they can be friendlier and seem less threatening and talk and interact with community members. I mean, all these little details that come up every single day in town operations, where we're trying to set a standard of behavior and change a culture, or have a particular kind of culture here in Orono. And of course, again, I know that we're not perfect, but it is a priority of this town and this community to have the kind of police force that the community wants. And yeah, I don't know what more to say than that, but some folks did come up to me to talk to me a little bit about what they think about local policing. And so, I mean, it's good to hear those things as well. But know that this is a council and this is a town government that really cares about this issue and is working and trying to be doing the right thing.
Cindy, what the thing that you read, that was from our chief?
No, that was from me.
That was from you. So Elijah McGill, for those who are listening, they probably didn't get the email that we got. So we as a council received an email from Elijah McGill, and it was long, and it gave examples of what other municipalities, police forces are doing and he had one very clear ask in here. He said, I am asking the town of Orono to make a statement condemning the murder of George Floyd and the institutionalized racism that makes murders like that an all too common occurrence. And I'm also asking the police department to do the same. As a child who grew up in this town, interacting with our school liaison officers, I know that our police department does not support actions like the ones that happened in Minneapolis. But it's not enough to silently disagree. This moment calls for public statements repudiating the actions of the officers who murdered George Floyd. There are numerous examples of what a statement could look like, and I have linked them here. So thank you so much, Cindy, for writing a personal statement. And I think that it's a great leadership action to respond to Elijah, who wrote to all of us as a council. And our response as a council would be, thank you for, I assume to be my vote for what it could be is thank you for this letter. And here is our statement, which would mean that perhaps we might, as individuals, add to Cindy's statement so that we could say we, and then each of us have a paragraph, as Cindy talked about her 20 years of working as an attorney. So that's one way we could respond. We could have our manager draft a letter that we all wrote, that we all signed, and that's addressing his first request, or we could say, no, we're not going to say anything as a council. But he did request that we make a statement as a council, and then his second request was a statement from the police. And as a council, that seems, my experience is that that's not the way we manage. That we advise and we set long-term goals, and then we have our manager work with staff, and they come to us and say how they think they should address things. So I'm not asking the police, Elijah's asking that, I'm not asking for that. I'm saying only what we might do as a council. And I appreciate all of your input, and it's great that you reached out to the people you've talked to. That's what our job is as leaders. And I guess the bigger picture is what we are right now. The way I see the big picture is that we're talking about budget several days a week. We take that very seriously, and our goal is to do the best by our town. We're concerned about the cost of things, but also we don't want to reduce the services that we provide as a town. But one of the things that that people who are talking about anti-racism, being anti-racist, as Ibram X. Kendi says, it's not enough to say you're not racist, it's to work to be anti-racist. We have a legal system and a culture that is grown out of a racist legal system and culture. And so disassembling that is a challenge, but we can see it already in our budgets. I believe in unions, and our police and firefighters have a union. Each of them have unions. And because they have unions, we are required, when we make a negotiation with them, to keep the staffing and to have certain descriptors or certain guidelines of how we manage that. Our other employees don't necessarily have that. Some of the discussion that's come up is that we wouldn't fill jobs to reduce our costs. I'm for keeping those positions open. We're going to discuss some of those today. I'm for keeping those positions open because that's part of the way our culture ends up becoming more militaristic, is that we have protections for the people who are doing our protection, like police and fire. We don't have the same protections for the parts of our municipal and government staff that are doing the things that help the safety net or the enrich our cultural institutions like libraries. And I want to make sure that we do that, because having enriched cultural institutions and serving our public are the ways in which we help people stay out of being in the situations where the police are responding. So I thank Eli. I propose that we write something as a council in support of our goal of being anti-racist and understanding that, and the things we've done already as a town to move toward anti-racism.
Thank you. I can either write up what I had, or I kind of thought everybody having a chance to make a statement today might be enough to, we're on record. I don't know if we need to go any farther than that, but we can talk about that a little bit. Not to change to a, I don't know how to segue out of this topic, but we'll move to an area. I think Sophie wanted to respond to another email about the bridge. Do you want to do that now, or you? Yeah.
Well, I figure we're on the topic of responding to emails that we have received. I received an email that I think councilors also got from a resident talking about one-way traffic on the bridge. I brought that back up to my public health team today. My infrastructure folks aren't here because they don't work on Mondays, but after spending an awful lot of time becoming acquainted with CDC guidance, we're just not seeing the public health need to change the traffic pattern, and a lot of unintended consequences for changing a traffic pattern on the bridge. So I don't want to ignore people ever who take the time to respond to council, but staff's guidance hasn't changed here. When you are outside, there are ways to walk around people without standing and having a non-socially distant interaction. And I can go into more depth, or I can just step back and let council give me some direction on this.
My only concern, I'm very concerned about the consequences of having people walk across 2 lanes of traffic to go one way or the other. So, but I am willing to heed to whatever our department heads have found to be most appropriate. Anyone else want to weigh in on this?
It would seem to me the only way to do the one way would be to initiate it at the lighted crosswalk on Main Street and then down at the intersection of College Avenue. I don't know what you'd ever do about people coming out of North Main Avenue, but I agree, Cindy. I understand the concern that the citizen had. I walk on the trails in town a lot, and I find most people quite respectful of distancing, even though some of the trails are quite narrow. They stop and move as far away as they can, and I do as well. But I am very concerned about the traffic. We have certainly had pedestrian accidents in our community, and unless they would be crossing at lighted intersections, I don't see how we could make that work safely.
I think that the guidance that you provided us, Sophie, was extremely detailed and thorough, and it made a lot of logical sense for some of the reasons that you, Tom, are mentioning, and among other reasons. I would be very comfortable with you sharing that information with the folks who've emailed to ask about this. And I would say that, with kind of picking up where Tom left off, I walk a lot around town, usually during busy times. And I'd say vast majority of the time, people just work it out on their own. If I've got the 2 wild dogs with me and there's one individual coming towards me, they step off the road for me. Or if I'm by myself and there's a little family with kids in a stroller, I step off the sidewalk for them. There's just a couple of times when someone is maybe less than respectful about your personal space. And I've found that I just stop and wait until they pass, and they usually get the message and move away. So it's maybe an awkward, uncomfortable social interaction to have with your neighbors about, hey, stay away from me. But in general, I think people are being very respectful about it. And if it's going to bring up more safety concerns than it solves, then it seems unwise.
I agree with, and I understand your post, Sophie, and I agree with that, absolutely. And all the comments that were made earlier as well. I also understand where these concerned citizens are, about the, feeling a little bit trapped, especially on such a narrow corridor and with the road. But the safety concerns seem much more serious, than what, not that COVID's not serious, but I think you know what I mean. Would there be, another issue I have is the perception of not doing anything. I'm saying like, oh, here's our report, and therefore this is what we're dealing with. So whatever, I mean, we do feel it's important, but the safety issues are kind of holding us back. Would there be any way of putting some sort of signage, laminated signage, something like that, just saying like, due to the COVID, situation, please be diligent in respecting people's space when passing on our paths, or something like, at least so we acknowledge it, at least so, we can't say, we're shutting down this sidewalk, you have to go this way, or you have to walk back up to the Circle K to get down, you know what I mean? So, but could that be a possible way, at least showing that we are aware and concerned and are encouraging people to be more diligent and respectful? Because not everybody, even though the majority are great, a lot of people just don't think, or they don't care about it, and maybe a little reminder could potentially help, and that seems like it wouldn't be a terribly expensive fix.
So I guess the only question I have, Sam, is we have many sidewalks that are 4 feet wide. There are as narrow or more narrow than the bridge. Do we need to do that on all of them?
No, but what I was thinking is the bridge is a main focal point. The bridge is what has come up from a number of emails. And I think if we post signage there, but then also ended up doing, because I know we have a crackerjacked social media team, and I know you're listening, Belle, that maybe we could put that reminder also on social media. I think a lot of people were really diligent about this the first month or so. We get used to it, get a little numb to it. Maybe people aren't quite as on top of it as they have been in the past. So I think maybe, in my mind, a combination of some kind of signage on the bridge, given that has come up, with a strong statement of supporting, just as a reminder to be respectful of people's space during this, and then maybe throw some social media stuff when you're using in Orono, we take this seriously. When you're using our sidewalks and our trails, please be those, the great Orono citizens that we're known to be, respecting each other's space, something along that line.
Sam, just to throw out there, I know the Orono Land Trust has put signs on the beginning of every one of their trails, or the most popular trails anyways, explaining how to distance on the trails. So.
No, that's great. I've seen some of those. Those are great. So does that sound reasonable, or is that like, I have no idea, but 2 cents respectfully submitted.
I don't know what to tell you.
Well, I think it sounds like a reasonable idea. Personally, I think the bridge is a unique sidewalk. You can't move onto somebody's lawn. It's got a barrier on the water side and traffic on the other side. I think that's a good suggestion.
Which, the suggestion that there be one way?
No, the suggestion that we put some signs on at the bridge reminding people to be respectful.
So one of the letters that we got was from the director of Independence Advocates of Maine, talking specifically focused on those who use a wheelchair and how difficult it is for them to get distance between them and others on the bridge.
If we did a statement, we could put something specifically about it and be especially cautious of those who are, are dealing with mobility issues or something like that. But at the same time, I mean, Lori, the whole point of what went on earlier is like how unsafe it is to have these people, anybody, disability or no, it's the safety issue of crossing at a well-marked limited thing. We all read the emails, thank you, but it's just a matter of how can we do something to acknowledge that we're trying to address this, but we have safety concerns? I don't know if we need to like put this entire transcript of this discussion on the sign. That's not what I'm saying. But we're not going to be able to, every time we get an email, we're not going to be able to check off every single thing, no matter who sends it. And I think, you know, when we look at—
Oh, I just, because we're in a public meeting and it said it was one letter. We actually got two in the last few days, and one of them was from an executive director of this organization, and one was from a citizen. So I wanted to make that clear to people who are watching, that that's what we're talking about. And then, yeah, so, and this was, and the staff had already discussed it because we had a comment before.
So if I could just get a little bit of clarity or tell you what I think. I think putting signage up is not a bad thing. The more it would be likely yellow with black writing because it's advisory. Nothing is going to be enforceable with pedestrians. But my preference, Sam, is not to do an in-house laminated job because they'll fall apart, they'll get wet, they'll get ripped. I would go ahead and talk to Rob about trying to get up some plastic signs.
That's whatever works best and does the job. I completely trust your discretion and judgment on that. Absolutely.
Because it probably will be up for a while, is my thought, and then we'll get some social media. It will take a few days to get it.
Yeah, white sign right up in Stillwater does a great job making any signs you want, and they do it very quickly.
Yep, they are our prime vendor.
Thank you.
But we would, yeah, we'll probably attach them to the light post.
Yep. Good.
Okay, we can do that.
Great. Thank you. That seems like a fair solution. We'll move into the municipal budget discussion. Laura, you had mentioned that there was something we wanted to try and break early. I don't know that we can, but if you feel, you know, a need to, then that you can catch up on Facebook, I guess, later. I would say whatever anybody wants to do about leaving at 5 to go to the rally or protest. So we're moving to public services. Sophie?
So if I was gonna recap, I would say that we had lovely conversation in general about how Parks and Rec, community development, and the library all work together. And then I think the consensus at that point was that these departments had been nibbled around the edges quite a bit, but there were some vacancies within the department that council really wanted to dig into. And so at the last meeting, we talked extensively around vacancies in Public Works and Parks and Rec. And we just didn't get to Lori and the library, and she waited for the whole meeting. So figure we should have this conversation with her first because she's been so patient. We have put together a little PowerPoint to help guide us. I will say before we start that Lori is a remarkable manager, and she understands where the town is today. She also understands we're walking into this transition with COVID-19 and trying to figure out how to make a library work. I think she's working really hard to try to find a reasonable solution for FY21, but it's really important that council understands that the things we're talking about today are not sustainable long-term, that this is like the 1 year we can kind of bounce back. It's in that same universe as the council pause. And I promised Lori that this wasn't going to be coming across as if we could just make massive cuts in the library, because to do that will dramatically impact the service. So we are going to try something. Belle, can you set me up to share my screen? So Lori and I are going to try to do this together and hopefully not talk over each other.
We haven't rehearsed those, so this could be interesting.
Why don't we try again? I'm still disabled. Ah. Let's start at the beginning. That's always a good place to start. All right. So just to think about the Orono Public Library, just so we're all kind of in the same, thinking the same thing, that we're talking about a 6,000 square foot facility. The cost of maintaining that facility are in the facilities budget, not in the library budget. That facility is open to the public 43 hours a week, pre-COVID-19. And that is a place where people had access to materials and technology and people to help them use that technology, which seems to be in very high demand in our library. We had a lot of programming that promoted literacy and information sharing, and we did outreach. We also facilitate state library services. And Lori, can you just talk for just a little bit about how that expands our services that we have?
Sure. So through the state library, we get many services. Some we pay for at a very reduced rate that we would pay if we were doing it on our own. And others come to us just by being part of the system. The interlibrary loan system, you may be all very familiar with. That is through Maine InfoNet, where we share materials with 60 other libraries. So patrons can request pretty much anything they're looking for, and it comes through on van delivery. We get van delivery 5 days a week. So items come in for our patrons and items go out for other patrons. Of that service, we pay for 2 out of 5 days because there are other funds available through state and local services that we receive. The online databases are free to all Maine citizens. And we have downloadable audio and ebooks, and we do pay for that, but again, it's a minimal cost. This year, when we shut down in March, we decided that it would be a good time to get a proprietary collection. So if you're on the cloud library, you will see that the Orono library now has its own shelves. So what that means is you don't have to wait as long if it's not being shared with everybody else in the state. So there are more things available. So those are the things that we get through the state library. We're very fortunate to get those things.
So in FY20, we provided these services through our staff. So we've got 40 hours a week for a library director. At least that's what we pay her salary based on. We have a youth services librarian, a circulation manager, both 40-hour-a-week positions. We then have a 20-hour youth services clerk and 24-hour circulation and technology coordinator. That's actually a full-time position that is shared with the tax increment financing district for communication and marketing. And 13 hours of a circulation clerk. Can you explain our volunteers, Lori, and how they're how we are currently impacted with volunteers?
So I didn't catch this when we talked earlier. It's not an average of 20 hours. It's an average of 20 volunteers a week. So each volunteer comes in, yeah, I didn't catch that, 2 to 4 hours a week. And we really depend on them for that, especially for van delivery. So when those bins come in every day, there is a volunteer assigned to emptying them, processing them, sending out the emails to make sure patrons know that their items are here waiting. We also have volunteers who come in to gather the things off our shelves and pack them up and get them ready for van delivery the next day. The other thing we rely on them pretty heavily for is reshelving of materials. That is something that I would say I have not done in years because of the volunteers. And the rest of the staff picks up when they need to, but we rely pretty heavily on them. And you can see Sophie's lines that everybody kind of reports to me ultimately, but I liked her little dotted line because it really shows how much we overlap. I'm the one who kind of hires the volunteers, but once they're on board, the circulation manager really takes over. She or he knows what needs to be done every day and makes sure that the volunteers feel that their time is well spent. So, and then we've got the clerks who are underneath each of the 40-hour positions. And again, I'm the one who ultimately hires and supervises, but there's a lot that goes on that different level, on the youth services level as well as the main circ level. So we're all working together, I guess is the message that I want to give there.
So when we look at status quo staffing levels, we were projecting simply by reclassifying 4 positions to put them on the organizational chart because we were not equitably classifying them. And there was, of course, the increase for health insurance that we've seen in every department. But that, just leaving things the same, would have been an increase of about $22,000 from the previous year's budget. So for FY21, we were budgeting a status quo for service. And in order to keep that service where we thought it really needed to be, we were adding 2 hours a week for the circulation clerk to make sure that Lori could adequately staff, right? That was more about having body.
Well, one piece I didn't really point out was both the youth services clerk and the circulation clerk share Saturdays. And while the youth services clerk is here 20 hours, so there are a number of hours during the week that individual is here. With only 13 hours for the other circulation clerk, there weren't as many hours to really know what's going on. So you can't really run the library on a Saturday without knowing what the processes are. And learning that during the week is really important. So we felt that position needed to get closer to 20 hours. And anyway, we could get it there. So 15 hours seemed to make sense this year.
So that added approximately a little less than $2,000 to the budget. So that was, when you think about the gain that Lori would have gotten for a small cost, it made a lot of sense. So then we went to the initial budget, because you create a budget, but then you have to print it and get through the budget process. And in the midst of that, we learned that the circulation manager, today was her last day, so she gave her notice. And as a way to help with the budget pause and cost reductions, Lori and I talked about holding off filling that position until October 1st. And so the budget, the initial budget that council received, included those first 3 months without the circulation manager, but everybody else in place. Then last week, we learned that our youth services clerk is planning to retire as of June 30th, which now we're down 40 hours a week. So the last budget update that you received included keeping the circulation manager position vacant until October 1st, maintaining the youth services clerk vacancy through FY21, and increasing the circulation clerk hours to 25 hours a week until the circulation manager comes on board. So that is the current budget draft. What you'll see is it is a reduction of approximately $32,700 over what it would have cost us to fund FY20 staffing levels. Second option that's not in the budget is for us to go ahead and bring that circulation manager position on. We say effective July 1, we can't hire a professional position like that in 4 weeks. But there would be some room in the budget to be able to increase the circulation clerk's time until that person comes on. We would think that we could leave the youth services clerk position vacant through the end of the fiscal year, or until more funding becomes available. You know, we've said that on a few of these. So in order to put this one in place, we'd have to add $11,822 back into the budget. So when we think about that, it really is about what service level council wants, because the less hours that Lori has staffed at the library, and we're not bringing volunteers in right now, the less work that we can do. So I thought I would have her kind of help walk through our staging transition plan and where we think we could legitimately get with the hours that we're talking about.
So the first thing we see as a priority, of course, is employee safety. And we've been working hard on that through this COVID-19 situation. This is the first week we are all back full-time in the library. Still doing Zoom meetings, but we're all here making sure that we are masked when we're out and about, walking around each other. And when we start providing services, we're also very aware of what type of safety measures we'll be taking, not only for the public, but for ourselves. So if we can move on to, maintaining our digital content is something we've been doing all along. We've got the RB Digital magazines as well as streaming services. Once that was set up, it's a pretty easy thing to keep on going. We do deal with a few technical difficulties here and there, but usually people email us and we can resolve those fairly quickly. The cloud library that I mentioned before, that too kind of runs itself, as well as digital main library. So that is something that we can do pretty seamlessly. Interlibrary loan is the next slide. There we go. And today we had our local reserves button switched to on again. If anybody has been looking at our catalog, you will see that you have not been able to request anything. And today that switch got flipped. So people can reserve items within our library. It may be a little frustrating experience because it doesn't look like you can reserve it, or it might tell you it wasn't successful, but that has to do with if an item is actually available in our library. There's a lot of background work that goes into interlibrary loan. And with the circulation manager leaving, we've made a list, or she made a fabulous list of tasks that need to be done, and we've kind of divvied them up. So we'll see how that goes. And the next slide, if we can go to that one, Sophie, because it kind of works in concert together, the delivery. So we're working on curbside delivery, and we've had lots of conversations on how to do this, and that meshes with the whole interlibrary loan system. The way we check materials in now that we have local holds again, there's a lot of work to be done there. We're not sure how long that curbside delivery is going to take staff time. We are getting that going as of next Tuesday. So people will be able to reserve online and then schedule an appointment for pickup. We're not sure how long that time is going to take. So we really want to take some time to figure out how much time or how many resources it takes to provide this service. And then our next step would be looking at appointments for computer use. We're aware that there are people out there that don't have access to computers or Wi-Fi, and they may need to apply for unemployment. They may need to look for a job or to fill out the census that we're all supposed to be filling out. So that would be our next step, and that would be allowing 2 to 3 people in at a time for an hour at a time, and then sanitizing everything after they're gone. So that's where we see our next step as far as being open to the public. Virtual programming, we have been doing some. Youth Services has really been up on that, doing pajama story time, a story time once a week, as well as Louise has been reading from a chapter book every Friday that people have been enjoying. Those seem to be pretty few resources, so we're thinking we could continue that. But we had also been doing book discussion groups, travel programs. We were looking into a trivia night, looking at different things that we could do. And with this reduction in staff, I don't see us doing a lot of that. We can continue what doesn't take a lot of time, but in order to really do this well, we wouldn't be able to do programming ourselves. Luckily, the state library has put together a state calendar that we can link to. It shows what other libraries are doing that's open to anybody in the state. So we're going to be promoting those programs rather than kind of creating things on our own. Once we get more staff, we'll look at that, ramping that up again. And then appointments for patrons to enter and use the library. Again, that's a little tricky. With our square footage, it looks like we can have 5 people in the library at a time, assuming COVID continues going for a while. And again, it's the question of what staff resources are going to be needed as far as counting the people who come in. We've read about, contact tracing, and making sure we know who the people are who have walked through the door, and then sanitizing after they've left. There's a lot of talk on the state library listserv about what people are going to allow in their libraries, including bathroom use. So, how do we deal with that? So lots of things to consider. And again, with fewer staff, fewer resources. So when we do open to the public, I don't see us just flinging open our doors. We've got to do it in a graduated way to see what resources we currently have, what's going to be needed in order to allow the public in a safe way. And again, according to how many staff hours we have, if we're fully staffed, that will look different. I don't know if this is a time to talk about those hours, Sophie, or if that's a...
Yeah, one more here and then that's the next slide.
Great, okay. Yes, in-person programming. I know there are families out there still looking forward to having story time again. And the travel programs that we were having had become so very popular, as well as our book discussion groups. We really would love to do them again, but again, how can we do it in a safe way? So that seems like the last thing that we will be able to provide once again when we are through this health crisis and when we are fully staffed again.
Lori, can I ask you a question just real quick? Where are you on the pedestal locker, and how is that going to help your delivery of materials?
Sure. So it was shipped today. Supposedly it will be in at the Public Works garage on Friday, and they are going to change the locks so that we are able to hang the padlocks on them. So it will help in that we won't risk having interactions, face-to-face interactions with patrons. They can schedule a time to pick up their items. We'll put them in the locker, and then they can come and unlock the locker, and it's a fairly simple thing to do. It's not Bluetooth, they do have to punch numbers, but we'll be sanitizing the locks after each use. So it will help during this time when we're not able to be open to the public. It will also be a long-term service where there are a number of people whose jobs keep them from coming to the library during regular hours. So we'll be able to use those lockers for after hours pickup. Did that answer for you?
Yes,
Carol?
thank you, Lori, thanks.
Sure, yeah.
So you want to talk about when we get ready to open, what that would mean?
Right. So if we're fully staffed, we're happy to open the 43 hours as long as the public health crisis has been reduced. We're open Monday through Saturday, 2 evenings a week. If we're not able to replace the youth services clerk, we would probably need to reduce and take 1 day off of that, Tuesday through Saturday, 35 hours. Without the circulation manager, we'd have to reduce even further, 30 hours. And if we had neither position, I don't see us opening more than 3 days a week for about 5 hours at a time. The difficulty with staffing is we try to have at least 2 people here at all times, but that doesn't mean that I just schedule 2 people at all times, because we have to account for sick leave, vacation time, emergencies. I usually try to have at least 3, if not 4, to account for that. And that's just having bodies here in the library. It doesn't speak to actually waiting on patrons. So we don't usually have a lot of people waiting, but certainly if they're in need, especially with technology, that takes us away from the desk. So it's necessary to have more people here than one might expect. It looked like you might want to say something about that, Sophie. No?
Well, I wanted to just say that it is when people come to the library, they expect a certain level of service, and it's a little bit about employee safety and a whole lot about the reason why people come to a library. I mean, if we don't have somebody that can wait on them or work with them, not really wait on them, but work with them, I think that it changes the library experience. And I just want to, you know, when council said we wanted to try to pick up the vacancies as they arrived, so that we weren't looking at potentially having to lay employed people off, I totally understood that, and I think that makes a lot of sense. The problem I have is that circulation manager is really critical to being able to operate the library. And it is, I think, really important that we bring that person on at least by the time that we're anticipating opening up a little bit more.
Absolutely.
And
what
and
it
I
really means, I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
What it means is the rest of the staff will take on tasks, but that takes something else off of our plates. So it leaves youth services and directors full-time employees. There's quite a bit that I do behind the scenes. I love waiting on patrons, but it's a luxury really for me. And certainly you all know Louise, and she loves working with families and kids. And without that other 40-hour-a-week position, we're going to be pulled to, we want to wait on patrons, but then there's something that gets taken off the plate.
Yeah, I think
our plate, so.
Yeah, I think with our response to the pandemic, the idea of losing the 20-hour-a-week person at a time when we're really not quite sure that we're going to be able to do the in-house programming,
Right.
that in-person programming that we would expect that person to really be a vital contributor for, that
Right.
I think that it makes it a little bit easier to contemplate having a vacancy. But
I think under normal, go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
See, we can reverse this. Under normal circumstances, I certainly would be advocating a lot harder to keep both positions. Certainly, my expectation is next year we would be up to full staff again. During COVID-19, when we're not open, we can kind of readjust things a bit so that we can accommodate fewer staff hours, and we'll do what we can for sure. So under normal,
yeah,
go ahead.
part of the plan without that 20-hour-a-week position, until we're open to the public to come in, the plan would be to have staff there Monday through Friday during
Correct.
regular day, not evening hours.
And not Saturdays. As long as we are not open to the public, we would do regular weekday hours. Yeah. Because the evenings and weekends really are accommodating people coming in.
Yep.
So, Lori and Sophie, I guess, school starts in September, and the library is a big place for the after-school middle schoolers. If you don't hire a circulation manager till October, I had 2 questions actually. I guess this is just such a hard time to figure out, because you don't even know what's going to happen with schools. My other question was, do you know of any internal employees that might apply for that full-time and you don't have to name names, or that full-time circulation manager that might make the transition a little easier, or maybe the hiring process not quite as long?
Yeah, this is a professional position without the necessity of a master's degree, but I really see it as needing someone with a lot of experience. And if that experience is a lot of experience with Maine Infonet, we had the luxury of Alexis being here to train Wendy for about 3 weeks before she left. And that was so helpful. We all know Maine Infonet and how to deal with, it's like being on a website or dealing with new software. You know how to look on the help button and get the help, but how much longer does it take to click that help button and figure it out than if you actually knew how to do it? So we can stumble along and figure it out, but when we've got someone who actually knows what they're doing and they understand the system, I just think it's going to be really important to find someone not just trainable, but has had experience with this. I mean, there's a lot of background to making the system run smoothly. And so I think that's what I'd be looking for. And right now we don't have anyone on staff who has that experience with Maine Infonet.
We don't know what the fall will bring, and I love the image, Cheryl, that we have school, that we're all safe enough to have our kids in school. And if that were the case, I also love the image of them coming to our library, and that our library would be open and available to our community members for the evening hours. And that may be very optimistic. However, I would love to see us budget for that eventuality, because even if we're not open, the people that we hire to work to fill these positions, they're going to be the people who are putting the hours in to figure out how we address serving our community in a time of COVID, because we don't know how long this will last, but we do know that we all have to rethink. And I salute the town. Early on, Sophie was contacting us about how the town was going to address this. Before the governor shut the state down, Sophie and her team were thinking about how we as a town were going to address this coming pandemic. And so I think that when we hire good people to fill jobs, even if right now we say, oh, well, that might be a place we could save some money because we're not open, I think they're going to help us move into the next level. And that's the kind of thing that we as leaders should be supporting, even though we're loath to raise the taxes because we have some people who squawk about the cost of living in Orono. But I've lived in Orono for 20 years. The taxes have been some of the higher taxes in our state, even before we had lack of revenue sharing since 2009. So I guess I'm supportive of us, instead of looking for ways to cut, I'm supportive of us looking to fund these positions and continue to have a library we're all proud of that's serving all of our community members.
So I'm looking at it a little bit differently. I think Lori has given a great deal of thought as to how things are might likely transpire in the coming year. I like the idea of hiring the circulation manager. I think that for this unique year, not hiring the the part-time clerk is a reasonable step. And I think Lori has thought through what adjustments are going to need to be made if that is to happen. And I would support that option.
I agree with Tom. That's similar. I mean, ideally, I'd love to have both positions hired, but given where we are right now, I think that's a prudent decision that hopefully is very helpful, much more so than not hiring either positions, I'm sure. But I support that. Again, as we mentioned with other discussions in the past about this sort of decision, this is not a forever thing. This is because of where we are now, and hopefully we'll be able to rectify this as soon as possible.
Can I just get some clarification that when you say hire, you mean as of July 1 or as of July or as of October 1?
Well, I thought the plan that you and Lori were talking about was hiring the circulation manager later in the year. Realistically, you're not going to find somebody for July 1, but
Yep.
increasing some time of your other clerk in the interim period of time to give you a little more person power in that library during that interim. Wasn't that the suggestion?
Yeah, so we offered two options, Tom. One
Okay.
was to wait and bring that person on as of October 1st and increase the clerk to 25 hours a week for that 3-month period. The other was to essentially fund the position as of July 1 and bring the manager on as soon as we could, but to increase the clerk's time in the interim a little bit. It's kind of
and increase the clerk's time out of the money that would have been allocated to fund the circulation manager if in fact you were able to hire somebody for
yes.
for July 1st. And that was the option where you would need to add in
A little bit
11,000
Yep.
plus.
Yep.
Yeah, I would be fine with that option.
Okay.
Yeah, so I support the option where we fill as soon as we can.
Yeah.
The options you've given us.
But I just
I
want
just wanted to,
Sophie is
go ahead,
maybe
Megan.
to ask maybe the same question, but just to be clear, I mean, I agree with Tom in hiring the circulation clerk, but that leaving the youth services position vacant until next fiscal year begins or until additional funds come through in the budget. I just also want to say, like, just because I don't want to leave it floating out there. I don't agree that people who have issues with their tax rate are squawking. I don't think that's how we should talk about people who maybe live in the margins or are elderly and on fixed income. I mean, there are people in this town who it isn't comfortable for them to pay this tax rate, and I think we need to be respectful of that when we talk about it.
So the other thing I just want to make sure we're being very clear on is that regardless of when we bring people on or our staffing level, I do not want Lori to be pressured to transition to open before she and her staff feel like it's safe for us to open up the building. I think that's really important.
And we're not just, going on our own. We're getting lots of guidance from the state, as I've mentioned before. So yeah, we're taking guidance and advice all along the way.
The only thing that I would add to that, I agree with that statement. I would certainly want our town manager to be part of that decision making.
Oh, absolutely. Yes,
It's
I guess I asked
just
her
assumed.
advice too. Sometimes I
Just
take her
assumed.
advice. Yeah.
Yep.
So I just wanted to clarify because I'm not, so are you suggesting to fill the position as soon after July 1 as we can? Okay.
Yes.
Great. And yeah, I was just going to go back to that, staffing level. So in doing that, once we have a circulation manager on board and we decide to open to the public, that would look like 30 hours a week. Is that correct? Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, I think that's correct. I'm just clarifying.
That would be Tuesday through
Yeah.
Saturday when we open until we can
sorry,
fill
35,
that other
because that's-
20.
I'm looking at this slide over here. It's actually 35 without the youth services clerk. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
But of course, with the understanding that if it takes longer for us to, I mean, it may be that even if we start opening the doors, it's not going to be 35 hours right away. It might be a phased in approach. I know that I thought I was ready for June 1st with the restaurant, and today's June 1st, and it has been very, just trying to put everything together and all the things that you're trying to anticipate, but you can't actually, foresee until the moment arrives. So, I also would hope that we're considering a gentle phasing in of the hours once.
Absolutely.
That makes sense.
And Lori, I just had one more question. When you have 5 patrons in at a time, is that including staff? Is that your 6,000 square feet?
We haven't gotten clarity on that yet. That is a question that you've been asking, and we're not 100% sure. So before we do that, we will make sure we know what we're doing and how many people. Sure. Yeah.
Was everybody else?
Oh, go ahead.
I was trying to kind of like, okay, first of all, Lori, I want to say, I commend you on running such an amazing ship there, because, I mean, I think that I kind of look at that a bit differently. I'll go back to, I think when Meg said about, I don't know how many sessions ago, but about like, we tend to touch the things that are important, like arts, the libraries and things like that very easily. I mean, I'm assuming that you have the smallest staff are close to it.
Second smallest. Parks and Rec has one in and one in.
That's right. Yeah, all staff in the town. Yeah.
And so when you spoke about like how, people go on vacation, when we start limiting it, it's, I don't know if I was reading the email from our resident there, Frederica Smith, that really is, I actually talked to quite a few residents who say, I live in Orono for a reason. And they're okay understanding that there are things going on and they don't want certain things to be gone. So I err on the side of caution, because I don't want to jeopardize you and your staff that are left to pick up the pieces and then put you in a bad space. So I worry about that, understanding that we have to kind of make sure that things are good. So yes, that option B was like, if we had to, option B was my choice. But I still worry about you guys and everything you're going to have to do. And I'm sure it's going to be a lot more busy based on the conditions. So thanks.
Well, thanks. I think we have a fabulous staff. So even the ones that are left, everybody was fabulous. We're sad to see 2 of them go. They were really a wonderful part of our work family. But over and over, I hear from the public how much they like our staff, and they really do a fabulous job. And I just wanted to build on something that Sophie was saying earlier about waiting on patrons. Oftentimes, it's not even helping with technology. You're checking out a book or doing reader's advisory. It's just talking to them. We have some people who come in the library and it's really their only connection to people, or one of their only connections to the community. And so we kind of serve that purpose too, to be a community center and a open place for anybody to come and know that they might see a friendly face. It's whenever I hire a circulation clerk, that the person you see as you walk through the door, the one thing I say is the most important thing to do is to greet everybody and to say goodbye to everybody. And they got that in there. They'll say, I know, the most important thing, say hello to everybody. And I was kind of like the Walmart greeter, but better. So I think that that makes a difference to people in the community, to know that they can come to a place and be known or not known if they don't really want to talk. Anyway, I just wanted to throw that piece in, that we do more. Sometimes, especially with the teens, we feel a little more like a social service agency than a library, but it certainly is a role we do play. Happily, even. So, but thank you for those supportive words. I appreciate it.
So what I'm hearing, I haven't heard from everybody, but what I think I'm hearing is to go ahead and kind of redraft, revise to fit option B.
So just to recap, option B is 40-hour circulation manager, which will allow the library to be open 35 hours, which is really, it's 8 hours that we're losing. And no youth clerk for 2021. And so we're saving about $11,000 in the budget?
No, you're gonna have to put about 11,000 back in. You're saving about $20,880.
Rather than the 32.
Yep.
Well, given where we were on coming down to a 0 increase, that's not too bad. I'm in favor of it.
I think it maintains more of the integrity of the mission of the library.
Thank you.
The
And
library.
this is with the understanding that this is only temporary and that we would go back to the 43 hours a week and the staffing as it was before. And
Once we're all back in normal, non-COVID world.
That's what you will see in the FY22 budget, or if we suddenly got gobs of revenue, like the feds came along and made the state whole, which then made the town whole, which would be about an $800,000 swing in revenue.
Sophie and Lori, I'm in favor too of getting our circulation manager as soon as we can, or by
Excellent.
July 1st.
Excellent.
Great, thank you so much. The staff will be thrilled. Thanks.
Well done, Lori. I think I promised you that you could depart when your part was over.
As much as I'd love to stay. Thank you all.
Thank you, Lori.
Thank you, Lori. All right. Well, that was good. So now we're moving on to council special projects. And does any counselor have a project that they would like to add or have discussed to add to the budget at this point?
Is this my cue to talk about about paint?
Sure.
Okay. I don't know whether, Sophie, whether you received anything from the group in terms of, okay, I had asked them, or I'd let them know that council would need like receipts, or, you know, at the very least, we could have an itemized kind of, you know, just for the sake of a council order, should it go to that. I asked this morning if folks had an estimate. They didn't, but I do know that the paint that they ordered came to about $200. And I imagine there'll probably just be a few little accessories that you'd need for that, paintbrushes.
At that level,
Could you explain what that project is, Megan?
So this is the Pride downtown businesses window painting and sculpturizing the town.
yeah, at that level of a funding request, would council be all right with me just, if it's under $300 or $400, can I just absorb that in my professional services line?
Yes.
Is that all right?
That would be fine.
That would, as
Fine.
long as, so June 30th is a magic date if we're gonna do it that way. That
Okay.
is a special magic date.
Yes, so we're hoping that mid-month, around the weekend that would have been the OBC 5K, we'll be able to do sort of a virtual kickoff event. Right now we have about a dozen properties downtown, including the town of Orono, who are making space for either sculptures or window paintings. We've got a bunch of volunteers from the high school and also from the university. It's all really coming together, and it's fun to see it all coming together. But yeah, so we're hoping for kind of a virtual kickoff and encouraging folks to take pictures with the windows or sculptures during the month and put our hashtag on it. And we're also going to be kind of using those Facebook mechanisms to raise funds for Maine Transnet.
If they need more window space, we've got 2 really nice big windows right in council chamber that could get painted?
Paint anything you got.
Okay.
Great, thanks.
I do want to say I have never seen such vibrant unicorn, zebra, or ostrich as some of the sculptures I've seen. So, town of Orono's in for a treat.
Dave Mylan says the TIF will pay for that. If it's businesses doing it, we can,
Awesome.
that's good.
So that's this year's budget. So anything for next year's budget that we need to discuss?
I don't have numbers on this, but is this an item, this sort of, any sort of funding to support sort of a pride, or more of a regular occurrence than trying to, like this year was a little bit of a hurry up offense kind of thing to get this done? Is there a way that we could put something in there? I mean, I would just be spitballing a number on that, but is this something that we see that's worth investing in the future? Not a minuscule amount, but something that's certainly not like a new truck or anything.
So I'm just wondering, Sam, we're coming up with some kind of interesting ideas here, like the bollard covers out front of the fire station. Would it make sense for us to get all but red and replace, do a rainbow across the front of the fire station? Was the fire chief's idea. And so those are things that we can protect and save and be able to use year after year after year. But the upfront cost is going to be, there's going to be some money that the fire department might have a little bit for, but not a lot. I'm wondering if instead of, since we don't know what the amount is, would it make sense if we were going to be buying long-term, savable, reusable things to recognize Pride Month, that we take that out of council special projects?
That would make sense to me if it's all right with everybody else. I mean, I just want to make sure this isn't a blip. I just would like to see this be, sort of reflect the ongoing concern and dedication to this for the town.
So I think that makes sense to take out of council special projects.
And just to remind folks, we will be having I don't know what to call it. It's not it's not an official committee, but it will be a gathering with community members.
Yes.
We're going to make a plan. Yep.
Great. Any other projects that anyone wants included? All right, if not, then Sophie, I guess we're going to follow-up discussion.
Yeah, so this is just, we're getting ready to bring Rob in on Wednesday and Joe Madigan in on Thursday, and then Rob and Joe and everybody else who has capital requests in the following Monday. And after that, we should be at a point where council is ready to wrap up the budget, whatever that looks like. Some years everything looks fine because we've made changes along the way, and other years there's a lot of discussion. I just want to make sure you have the documentation that you need. Is there more information that you need from me? You do not have an up-to-date water pollution control budget or capital plan. Joe and I are actually still trying to make that work and talking with Boyd about what he's seeing for numbers. We're really concerned about revenue in that department. So we're kind of, hopefully we'll have something to you in the next day or two.
Sophie, when we get with Rob, if we could discuss North Main Avenue and all the different scenarios, if he could be prepared to talk about that.
So you'd like to talk with that on Wednesday or the following Monday when we talk about the capital plan?
wherever it fits in infrastructure.
So if I had him prepared, Cindy, to go through his budget, and if there was time, you guys could just slide into an infrastructure discussion. Does that?
Yep, that's
And
good.
everybody saw that there's a pretty, he worked really hard to put a really nice infrastructure report together, narrative for you in the budget. So, okay, I'll make sure he's ready for that.
Great.
And Sophie, have you heard anything more from the state or the feds or anything more, like money
About
coming?
money coming?
Yeah.
Well, we received the $6,000 through Penobscot County EMA. They've actually been doing a really nice job trying to support us throughout this whole pandemic. We had our initial scoping meeting with FEMA. We have applied for, and it's open. We're actually going to try to take it as 2 separate grants. FEMA does reimbursement, and the emergency is still open. They're going to allow us to close it as of June 30, which will allow us to bring the reimbursement into this fiscal year, which will be good for this year's books. And then we'll reopen one as of July 1. They are trying to figure out what's going to be allowed and what's not. So, for example, we know overtime associated with COVID-19. So when we had to send all of our firefighters home because they were exposed to what they thought may be a COVID patient, we're able to recoup the overtime associated with backfilling that shift. The cement barriers out at Gould's Landing and Netto Savoy, we're able to recoup 90% of that as well. So we are, it's truly on a reimbursement basis. One of the things that I'm looking at right now, it seems as though they might be willing to fund a park attendant. So for us to put somebody out at the park, if we decided we wanted to open it, to clean the porta toilet and to keep people socially distanced. But we're still, before I expend money, I want to make sure that we will reasonably get.
Yeah.
So beyond that, I am not hearing that there is a great money train coming to make the state whole. And the state is, I think last I saw, $525 million short. They're anticipating being this year. State comptroller has done some things that have really mitigated the impact to us this year, but they keep making sure all of their guidance to us has these big, bold italics notes underneath the numbers that say to expect a cliff come the beginning of the year. So there are managers, even managers around us, who are using the revenue sharing data that was published on March 4th, and which predicts a pretty big increase in revenue sharing. I just don't, I would be really nervous to do that. That could put a significant hole in our budget, like about an $800,000 hole in our budget.
Yeah, Sophie, I'm also very interested in how our numbers, as we're in June now and we're getting close to the end, how close we are to being, within budget with revenues and expenses. So
yeah, and that's going to be easy for me to pull because I track that weekly here. But last week it looked like we were going to be about $100,000 to $150,000 with a net gain, which is very small, but is a lot better than what I was thinking. And the way we get there is we were still about $300,000 underspent, under collected in revenue, but we have pretty much stopped spending here. So we've got some gains. My plan would still be at your June 15th council meeting to create an infrastructure reserve and to dump all of the money from the projects that you want to have completed this year that haven't been completed this year into that reserve account, so that we're not carrying it forward, but we've got it set aside so that the projects can be actually done. And that number includes doing that $100,000 to $150,000.
Great.
Cindy, to go back to Sophie's question about do we have the information that we need, I just like to say I think Sophie, you've done a spectacular job this year in providing us with data at almost a minute's notice. So thank you for doing that, and I've got plenty of information.
Thank you. Thank you.
Great. Is there any more? Is there a brief town manager update?
I do. I've got a couple of things. The first thing is we started with a soft opening for people downstairs to get service from the clerk's office in person by appointment. If you go on the website, there is a button to click that will allow you to schedule an appointment. And they are all scheduled. I will tell you, they are filling up fast. People are, when they sign up, they have to answer health questions. You know, have you had a fever? You know, have you been around any, all of the standard ones. And we let people know that while we are practicing some pretty heightened safety protocol, because of the glass partition that is now out front, my staff is not wearing a mask, and we ask them to make sure that they know that, and if they have an issue with that, they can call in and we'll try to find a workaround for them. I am anticipating that code will come online for appointments. It takes a little bit more time to get them back for a variety of reasons, but we're hoping, part of it is the planner's only here half the time, working from home the other half, because I need to split that office for finance. The assessor is going to start contacting folks around doing inspections, and if people don't want to do it, then that's fine. But if we've got people that are fine with him going through with a mask to do the inspection, we want to try to get as many as we can. The longer this gets delayed, the more risk we have of the data that we started with being stale, and I don't want us to have to spend the money twice. So that's where we are with those. And then we've talked at length about the library. Everything else, all of the buildings are still locked down, and the public to just general public access. We're not welcoming people into our space. What CDC is telling us and what Jeff is advising is the more lockdown I can keep the offices, the less risk there is to staff. So the more we can do appointments that we can control. And I'm hoping that, for example, out front, right now we're booking, I think it's almost an hour between. As we get better at it, we'll be able to shrink that down and have more appointments in a day, I think is the goal. Another thing, I've gotten some questions about public meetings because, you know, people got to go back to work and they think we should start be meeting in person. And I have a real concern about meeting in person when you consider that council chambers is a fairly small space, and according to CDC guidance, it's not just a maximum of 50 people. It's a certain number of people for the space. And I think we're at like 5, that 5 people could be there, members of the public. And I have a hard time having a meeting in a community of 11,000 people when the most we could have in attendance is 5. It seems like this format is more conducive to ensuring transparency. And just because that's my thought, council meetings, really, that's not my job to decide. That's really your job. And I just want to put it out there that I'm not offering it simply because I have concerns, but it's really something you guys need to decide.
I like this. I'm saving lots of money on gas. I have a question, Sophie, about voting. I don't know what your,
Yeah.
I don't know if you're ready for that yet, or if Cindy has some. Did you have a question, Cindy? About
I just to follow up the last conversation, I agree with, we're still maintaining social distancing, and no offense to my fellow counselors, but we can't put between us on that dais up there. There's no way. I mean, the four of us would be there, and the rest would be outside the window.
Untaken. So Matt Dunlap was on NPR this morning or this afternoon talking about voting. Did you hear it? Did you hear the show? Oh, okay. And so absentee voting, it sounded a little complex even when Matt was talking about it. And it starts June 14th, I think, is when we technically.
30 days. Yep.
Would you have to make an appointment with Shelley if you wanted to vote in town as an absentee?
If you wanted to come in, collect your ballot, turn around and go to the poll that we have, I would say probably yes. I think we probably could make those pretty brief appointments.
And to get a ballot, an absentee ballot, do we have that information up on our website yet?
You know what? Belle is live, which tells me she wants to talk.
Okay.
No longer just the voice of the logo. So Cheryl, you asked some good questions. We don't have full guidance yet from the Secretary of State's office in terms of how we're supposed to process people who want to vote in person absentee. So we're kind of still waiting on better guidance for that. We're limited to 2 people in the lobby at a time. So if we had somebody voting, even though they might only have a 10 or 15-minute appointment, that would take out the other ability to do registrations, et cetera. So we're trying to get better guidance from the Secretary of State as to how to best do that. You can request absentee ballots already. We had 75 requests come in over the weekend. So you can do that online. There's information on our website, orono.org, and also on the state website. And also people call in and they request the absentee ballots, and we take down their information and we mail out the ballot when we receive them. Of course, we don't have them yet. So, and then the drop boxes, when we have our locker up and going, our locker came in on Friday, we're waiting for our locks. That will also be an option for people to receive their ballots.
Thank you. Thank you, Belle.
Actually, Belle, I actually did the online request, and it got sent to you, and then Shelley sent me a confirmation that the ballot would come to my house. And so it's really easy if you do it online. You don't have to worry about anything.
Good.
Great. Any other questions or updates?
I guess Sophie just mentioned her reasoning on keeping our meetings to be Zoom meetings, and Sam supported that and Cheryl supported that. And I support that too. I think that it's allows people to attend. There is the challenge that some people aren't so comfortable with the internet, but we've now had a few months of practice. I've seen people show up and make comments that we hadn't seen walking in. I've had people comment to me that the fact that we meet at 4, it's earlier and it's easier for them to do that while they're also watching their kids. So I would like us to continue, both for the safety of each other and for people who would come into the room, and also because of the accessibility that I've seen by us having it in a Zoom format.
Great. Did you have something else?
Yeah, just that on Thursday, we're gonna need to have a special council meeting. I've got a couple of things, and one of the things I'd like you to do is agree to tell residents that they need to register their cars by the end of June if they expired in March, April, or May.
How does the box work for that? Do I? So say you had one or two vehicles that you needed. Do I drop old registration in the drop box? And how do I know how much to pay?
I'll let Belle take that.
So typically what happens is we have people call ahead of time and they say, I need to re-register these particular vehicles. They go through all the information with somebody on the phone, and then we let you know exactly how much the check is going to be, and then the information that you need to drop off. So we need a copy of the copy of your insurance showing that you have valid insurance. We need your mileage, and we need the old registration to make life easier for you. We also have people who just drop everything off and they say, please call me when it's ready and I'll bring the check. So we've done a whole bunch of different things back and forth trying to accommodate it. But the best thing to do is call ahead so that you know exactly what it is that you got to bring and how much money to leave with it.
And Cindy, if truth be known, it wasn't until Sophie said that we were down on excise tax that I registered my car.
And also, as a reminder, that you can do all your re-regs online too. So you can go to orono.org and do that.
Easy, so. Okay, with that, does anyone have anything else before we adjourn?
All set.
All right, well, we will see you all Wednesday.